All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials Are Old podcast. And you know what, Brian? It's been a while since we reviewed a sequel.
Yeah, I feel like we have an unspoken policy to push forward that's why we chose to be the first podcast by two 30 something dudes where we review movies. And since there's no sequel to what we're doing, I've made it a policy to avoid sequels generally. Is a thing I decided just now in my head that I haven't told you about yet.
Yes. And we've mostly avoided reviewing sequels. I think the last sequel that we did was Billy Jack, which was, of course, was a movie that was just a pure action flick. There was no narrative, just all action. In fact, I was like, where's the characterization? What the fuck?
Well, yeah, there was no ulterior motive to make it. Really balls to the wall action. It really does not stop. When you are on the Jack train, it's not stopping for you. It's not stopping for monologues. It's not stopping for weird comedy sketches. It's about kickboxing.
It's just about an action dude doing action.
It is a dudes rock movie.
And, speaking of action movies that are about action and dudes rock movies, let's get into our next film here, which is our review of The Raid 2. And this time it does not have a stupid subtitle like The Raid did, which was Raid Redemption, which is a very dumb name to have for an initial film. A very stupid name to have.
I have no idea. I read about it when we did the episode, but now I can't. Why did it end up being called The Raid Redemption? Because that wasn't a creative choice, right?
No, I think the distributors made them put it on for some reason.
So bad.
So bad. But speaking of things that aren't bad, The Raid 2. Let's get into some facts here of The Raid 2. Now, of course, this was a sequel to The Raid Redemption. Ironically enough, The Raid Redemption is the first one.
Yeah, sounds like it should be a sequel.
Yeah. But this one was released in 2014. It was rated R. Would you believe it's rated R, Brian?
Well, I don't see why. I mean, it's just a chill movie. No, extremely graphic violence.
Extremely violent film. This was directed by Gareth Evans, who also directed the very first movie, and it was written by him as well, and he also wrote the very first movie. And another trend here, this was also produced by the producer of the first movie, Ario Sagantaro, as well as two other men who don't even have any Wikipedia articles, but I'll put them in here anyways. Nate Bulletin and Aram Tertzakian. And that last one, that guy sounds very Armenian. I don't know why. I'm just assuming that guy's aggressively Armenian. So very multicultural production crew here.
Really?
And of course, Gareth Evans is most known for directing the original Raid. He also directed the movie Marintow, which is the production company that his production company is now. That's the name of it, Marintow Pictures.
Name before that?
Yes, that's correct. He also directed a movie called Apostle and an upcoming film called Havoc, which actually has a very stacked cast, believe it or not. Yeah. It has Tom Hardy, it has Forrest Whitaker, and Timothy Olyphant. And allegedly that's coming out near the end of the year.
So, and this is an action film?
I'm not entirely sure. It says a thriller film, but there could be some action in it.
Well, okay, because I'm guessing it's not an action film the way that the Raid movies are, just because they're so based in practical stunt work and things. And I love Forrest Whitaker, but is he known for his stunt work?
Not really. I don't think he did a whole lot of kung fu action films or action scenes in The Last King of Scotland, but I could be wrong about that.
Not a lot of that in Man on Fire.
Or in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He wasn't he wasn't doing taekwondo in Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Some great stunt work in Fast Times, but not from him.
Yeah.
Actually, so this is so embarrassing because I know Forrest Whitaker, great actor. First role I think of him in. When I think of him, when his face pops into my head is Phone Booth.
What is Phone Booth? I've never heard of that.
Phone Booth is a Joel Schumacher thriller starring Colin Farrell.
Oh, I know that movie.
He's in a phone booth, and this guy's saying, if you leave the phone booth, you hang up the phone, I'm going to shoot you. And people hate it. I love it. I think it kicks ass.
I mean, I saw the previews for it. I've not seen it, but I've wanted to for a long time. It looks like an awesome movie.
This is a bit of a derail, but I'm going to get, well, you like the same Schumacher movies I do. So I think you would like it. My brother's review of Phone Booth when we were arguing about it is he said, this is stupid. This is like if I made a movie called Urinal, where I went to a urinal to pee, and the guy came up to me and held a knife to my wiener and said, I'm going to cut your wiener off if you move. And then it went on for 2.5 hours.
That actually kind of sounds like a riveting movie, to be honest.
Yeah, I know, to me too, yeah. Sorry. Just, anyways, Forrest Whitaker did not do a lot of stunt work.
No, he did not. Also, and this is the big difference. I should say the entire narratively, both these films are completely different.
Oh, yeah.
However, I would say the most crucial difference is that this movie is 150 minutes. It is 50% longer than the last movie, which was 100 minutes long.
Yeah.
And you would think, wait, The Raid Redemption, a movie that is a tight 100 minutes of pretty much nonstop balls to the wall action. How do you add 50 more minutes to it? Well, hazard this, audience. This film is completely different than the original in almost every way.
I'm so excited to talk about this because I'm going to tell you, Taylor, I didn't want to do this sequel when you proposed it because I assumed it was I was like, well, why do you make a sequel of The Raid Redemption? It's going to be a rehash of that movie. I was kind of like, and I knew it was probably good because you said it was, but I was kind of like, I don't really know if I'm going to have that much to say about this. And about 10 minutes in, I was like, all right, I'm strapped in.
Hell yeah, I'm really glad to hear that because this is a much more daunting film to get into than the first one. Because the first one, for the most part, you can just really tune into the action and not really pay attention to any sort of narrative structure because the first movie doesn't really have much narrative to go off.
Yeah, this is daunting is a good word. Daunting is maybe a harsh word, but yeah, it's dense. But I'm gonna say I think I like this one better, and I'll get into why.
That is into
why as we get there.
Take. Actually, it's not that spicy of a take, but
yeah, and you'll remember I liked the first one quite a bit. Well, so we'll get into it at the appropriate times. But yeah, I think I liked The Raid 2 better than The Raid Redemption.
Man, some critics would agree with you. And speaking of, let's get into some box office numbers here. So this movie had a budget of $4.5 million, which was actually 4 times the budget of the very first movie. And I'll just say this,
big.
It's not big, but I will say you can definitely tell the budget difference.
Oh, yeah.
Like the first Raid movie, 95% of it takes place in the apartment complex. And this movie has a ton of different sets. A ton of different sets. The camera work is also, I would say, much more dynamic. I know you complained about and not necessarily complained, but it is kind of just a feature of the first movie. But the first movie is like very gray and like very dark.
Yeah, that was one of my I was going to ask if you remembered my main issue with The Raid Redemption and other action films of that era. And there it is.
It's just very great.
It serves a purpose. I understand why it is that way, but it's just not what I like. This movie kind of starts like that, and you think it might be the same. The first 10, 15 minutes are very great. And then, there's like a set change, and there's actually such a diversity of scene and such a diversity of characters. And the kind of movie is like an exercise in world building.
And no, it is 100%. Yeah, because like the first movie, and that's what a sequel should be.
Yeah.
Like the first movie is you set up. Obviously, if you're going to make an entire film series, that's how you do it. And the second movie is you expand upon the world from there. Because in the first movie, you only get really a glimpse on this, just seedy underworld of Jakarta's crime.
And you're watching it happen in real time. It's interesting you say that that's what a sequel should be, because I agree. This is, in some ways, I'm excited to talk about this. This is barely a sequel to The Raid Redemption.
It is. And I will say, once we get to the synopsis, but just a little preview of the synopsis, outside of the first 10 or 15 minutes, you could watch this movie without watching the original. It's that much of its own original piece. Yeah,
you take a couple scenes out, and it's a unrelated story.
Absolutely, 100%. And then for the box office, this movie grossed $6.7 million in the U.S., and it sold, and I've never seen this as a measure of success, but apparently in Indonesia, they count their box office by number of tickets sold. So apparently in Indonesia, this movie sold about 1.43 million tickets. And so I looked it up as well. And in 2014, the average movie ticket price in Indonesia was the equivalent of about $3.87 US. So I'm just going to round up to $4 just to make it easy. So this movie in total made about $12.5 million US at the box office on a budget of $4.5 million. So a light box office success, but definitely not a massive
tiny little profit. Yeah,
exactly. Whereas the first film grossed, I think, around $10 million and had a budget of, once again, about $1 million, $1.1 million. So not as much of a profit here, but I will say I think the results really speak for themselves on a filmmaking perspective.
Yeah, I mean, this is more than The Raid Redemption. This is very much in that tradition of gangster epics. It is epic feeling.
Yeah, I guarantee you Gareth Evans probably watched The Departed and Infernal Affairs and probably based this film on a certain amount of that film. Not all of it, because there's definitely some pretty big narrative differences, but there's definitely some similarities as well.
Well, and that, to be fair, that is just that trope of the undercover cop. The reason I think that's so big in the Hong Kong action films. This film isn't from Hong Kong, but the films that it's heavily inspired by are all the John Woo shit, the Ringo Lam. The reason that undercover cop, that double agent, gangster for the Force thing is so big there, it's because it does play into to traditions about like, where does your loyalty lie, and like, senses of honor and masculine duty and things. So I don't want to say, I think Infernal Affairs is the obvious reference point. It's not like a 1-to-1. They're doing, other things with that premise.
No, for sure, 100%. And then speaking of other films that are critically acclaimed as well, let's get into the critical and audience acclaim of this film. So this film has an 82% critic score and 87% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, the critic score for this one's actually slightly lower than the first one on Rotten Tomatoes. However, it has the exact same audience score on Rotten Tomatoes for both the Raid Redemption and Raid 2. Although, slight divergence here on the scores, the Raid Redemption has a 7.6 on IMDb and a 7.9 on IMDb for the Raid 2. So they're pretty much neck and neck for critical and audience acclaim.
I think rightly so.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And really the only, like, in general, right, a original movie and its sequel, both being completely different films narratively, but also being almost completely, like, equally critically acclaimed. The only similarity I can really think of is, like, what, Alien and Aliens, or, like,
Indiana
T1
Jones,
and T2?
Raiders and Temple of Doom. T1, T2, shit like that, which are, family movies. What, Back to the Future 2, it's shit like that. Yeah.
But not very common. That's very rare.
Yeah.
Especially in the modern era. That is super duper rare.
And again, when that does happen, it's usually not movies like this.
And then speaking of, let's get into some trivia here. So I have about 6 trivia facts, and the first one I have here is all the punches and kicks to the body of the actors were real. Iko Uwais and the other fighters had to learn how to control their speed and strength so that it would look real on the camera, which I would assume you can only make it look so real because after having to do like a bunch of takes, you're probably pretty sore afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
So.
It reads. One of the things, and I don't want to, I don't know a lot about martial arts at all, and it seems almost trite to say it. But of course, the thing with non-Western martial arts films is you're getting, not even actors, you're getting athletes who are really doing these things. The fights aren't to the death, but what you see on screen is what's happening. That's what they're doing to their bodies.
Yeah, and I saw the behind the scenes of the first Raid movie, and oh man, they are just getting fucked up in that movie. Like in the behind the scenes, like they're taking actual hits. There's sweat everywhere. Like it looks rough.
Yeah, there's only so much you can act getting kicked in the chest.
Yeah, and of course we've reviewed several American action movies where you can tell the hits are totally real, like in Billy Jack and Gamer. You can tell every hit was real.
Yeah.
You could tell the camera's completely steady and it remains on the action the entire time.
Yeah, they're the actors and the stunt doubles, they're the same height. They look the same.
You could tell they definitely don't use body doubles and then cut it back into the real actor.
Yeah, it's a stunt double that's like 5 feet taller than the main guy.
Oh, man. And the next fact we have here is the final epic kitchen scene, which is very reminiscent of the Mad Dog Rama and Andy fight scene in the very first movie. So that's another similarity that it has.
It's got kind of a final level of a video game feel. You're ascending up,
Exactly. It took 8 days to film and contains 195 shots total, which is fucking crazy. Because it doesn't look like it takes 195 shots.
That last series of fights, and particularly, the one in the kitchen, it's insane. It is insane watching. It feels like it goes on forever, but it's not boring at any point.
No, it doesn't. It's fucking fantastic. Next fact I have here is director Gareth Evans told a fan on Twitter that part of the film's budget was funded by selling rights to Screen Gems for an American adaptation. And you know what, Gareth Evans? Good on you, because there has not been a sequel and you still got your bag. Congratulations.
Yep. I hope there's never a sequel. We'll talk about it at the synopsis, but I know people want one. I don't see why you would make a sequel to this movie. The end of the movie is definitive. That's the end of this character.
It is very definitive. It is very fucking definitive. Next fact I have here is for the car chase scene, roads had to be cleared from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day.
Oh, that pissed me off so much.
And I totally understand that. It's very similar to when they did that opening London scene in 28 Days Later. Here's the thing. Just like London, I assume they shot this movie in Jakarta. I don't know that, but I'm assuming that. Jakarta has like 20 million people in it. Imagine closing a major road in a city of 20 million people for 12 hours during all business hours.
Yeah, man. Just as someone who doesn't have a car, someone who commutes everywhere, I'd be so mad.
Oh God. And like I think outside of like Manila, Philippines, like Jakarta has literally the worst traffic in the world already. So like I couldn't fucking imagine how awful that was to live through.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. Sorry, I can't come into the office today because they're shooting The Raid 2.
I couldn't come into the office because a weird Welshman is shooting his movie.
Yeah. You'd be so fired.
Yeah. Next fact I have here is on the episode aired on September 25th, 2016 of The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, Samuel L. Jackson said The Raid 2 was his favorite movie.
Nice.
And you know what, Samuel L. Jackson? You have good taste. I fuck with that.
I don't know anything about his taste. I mean, I assume he has good taste because he's Samuel L. Jackson. That's cool. I mean, that definitely fits in with the types of movies and obviously he likes working with Tarantino. He, it's pretty clearly a fan of 70s martial arts and things. So that makes sense.
No, 100%. And who was, it was Cate Blanchett, who one of her favorite films was Rare Export. So we have two like high grossing, high acclaimed actors endorsing movies we were reviewing.
Let's get Cate Blanchett on the show.
Oh, yeah, we should. Friend of the pod, Cate Blanchett.
Friend of the pod.
And the final fact I have on here is, I don't know how true this is, but I'll just take it at face value. The body count of this movie was 327, and the first movie had a body count of 121. So...
Yeah, that checks out. I mean, just the scope of this film is so much bigger that if it maintains the same level of violence throughout as The Raid Redemption, which I would argue it does, then yeah, that seems like that checks out. That's about roughly what the death toll would balloon up to.
Oh yeah, 100%. I just saw 327, and I've now seen the movie 3 times total, 2 for this episode, and then 1 couple years ago. And watching this, I could see how they could get to that number, but I would assume you would have to take every actor who gets punched, not necessarily one who definitively dies, which is fine.
Sure. I mean, some of those punches, like in this movie, there's a lot of skull crushing, so we can assume
that
hits are taking people out.
All right, let's get to the synopsis here. So this movie takes place immediately after the first movie. According to Gareth Evans, it takes place about 2 hours after the first movie. Immediately after help. So once again, this is 2 hours after Rama, Andy, Sergeant, or I think it's Lieutenant Wayu, that was the guy who betrayed them in the first movie, and Bowo all make it out. So immediately after helping Rama, played by the actor Iko Uwais once again, take down his boss in the previous film, and that's also his brother, Jakarta gang boss Andy, that's his brother, is captured and executed by another criminal named Bejo, played by the actor Alex Abad. Now, I liked the scene because it was a nod to the first movie, because it's like, hey, there's this kind of happy ending where a couple people come out alive, and it's like, you may have liked that guy. No, fuck you, he's dead.
Yeah, I thought just right off the bat, this is not a happy world. And that continues throughout the movie. You don't really make it out of this life. There isn't any walking away from it. Picking up right away. Some of the people you thought got away, they're dead.
Yeah, it's sad. So rest in peace, Andy. Rama, you did the best you could to save your brother, but I'm sorry, he's dead. By a character we don't even know his name yet.
And we won't think about him again. He's had no impact on us.
Exactly. He's just a guy with slick back hair and a cane for some reason. What a wiener. No. Meanwhile, Rama brings his injured squad mate, Bowo, played by the actor Tagar Satara, who is one of the only people that once again survived the raid out of like the 20 other fucking SWAT team members that died along with him. And corrupt Lieutenant Wayu. Now, I didn't include the actor's name because the original actor in that movie was named Pierre Gruno. However, he did not reprise his role, and you can tell because they never show his face.
Yeah.
They shroud his face behind fucking Rama's body. It's very hilarious. But they meet up with Lieutenant Bunawar, played by the actor Coke Sambara. Now, Bunawar is actually, I believe, noted in the very first movie, but we never actually get to see him.
Yeah.
He's the guy that Andy's just like, go to him. He will help you out. Just whatever you do, just go to Bunawar.
What I'm guessing, this film began as a different film. That was not a sequel to The Raid Redemption. But my guess is that he had that name in The Raid Redemption and saw an opportunity there to build that into an existing character in the script to like tighten the links between the two films.
That makes a lot of sense. And in fact, I believe the very first movie in Indonesia was called Bunawar, but I could be wrong about that.
Really?
Or it was like a subtitle, which even though I don't know what Bunawar means, I assume it's just a regular name. It's still better than Redemption. It's still better than Redemption.
I mean, like, the thing is that when I talk about it, I want to just call it The Raid, but I know people will know it as The Raid Redemption and think I'm talking about something else.
Yeah, no, 100%. But Bunawar is head of an internal investigation unit of the Jakarta police. Bunawar sends Bowo away to be treated and has Wayu killed under the pretense of keeping Rama safe from other crooked cops, and asks Rama to help him expose police chief Reza, played by the actor Roy Martin. Now, I thought this was really interesting. At the very end of the first movie, it's basically Wayu is told that he'll never make it out of this building alive. He killed the main mob boss guy from the last movie, and he's getting caught by the police. He killed the crime boss guy, and he's like, well, might as well kill myself. He's not able to kill himself because he runs out of bullets. So I think it's really funny that like they make a big deal in the first movie about him not being able to kill himself, and in this movie they just immediately kill him.
Yeah.
It rocks.
He doesn't get the honor of taking himself out.
Yeah, no, it's fucking great. But once again, Reza is a corrupt police chief who has crooked dealings with the gangster Bengun, played by the actor Tio Pukasadewo, and the Japanese crime boss in Jakarta, Goto, played by Kenichi Endo. Rama initially refuses, but agrees after learning of Andy's death. So he's basically gets involved in this plot by this internal affairs officer who also kills other cops, by the way. So like Rama's going to lose either way. So it's like, fuck it. I might as well avenge my brother. That's seemingly the path. He's like, well, if I don't avenge my brother, I'll probably die. But if I do, I'll probably die anyway. So man, fuck it. Like, yeah, it's just like
that is set up right at the beginning. And even in The Raid Redemption, that's kind of like at the backdrop. It is that like you really aren't hoping for, you know, any of these characters to walk away surviving, because the movies make very clear that probably isn't going to happen for anyone.
No, yeah. There's just really no happy endings. And the most happy ending you can think of is that Rama's family lives.
that someone can walk away maintaining some sense of like dignity.
Exactly.
When they die. Yeah,
and I would say Bowo is probably the one who has the best ending because he gets to just be healed off screen.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Bunawar tasks Rama to infiltrate Bengun's organization undercover and also suggests Rama to gain the trust of Bengun's son, Uko, played by the actor Arifin Putra. Now, I do want to mention this actor because I looked at him, and there's a Japanese crime syndicate and there's an Indonesian one. For like half the movie, I was kind of confused because he looks Japanese, but apparently he's ethnically German and Indonesian. So I guess that combination just creates like vaguely Japanese looking people. I don't know.
Okay.
I thought that was very interesting to me because I don't know why. I just had that confusion at first. And then also, we got a note. This guy looks like a fucking model, right?
Yeah, no, which also that tracks if he's like a rich kid, son of a crime boss. So you're like, oh, this is like a pretty boy.
Yeah, no, 100%.
This guy's like got baby hands.
That guy's jawline is stronger than my future. Like,
yeah, he looks like he's like a pop star. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, but once again, Uko is currently in prison. I'm not entirely sure why he's in prison, but obviously I assume probably some crime-related thing along with that.
The reason people tend to end up in prison, something crime-related.
100%, yes. But using the pseudonym Yuda, Rama deliberately lets himself get arrested and gets himself put in the same prison as Uko. In prison, Rama successfully gains Uko's trust by saving his life during a violent riot intended to cover up an assassination. Now, the synopsis that I have does gloss over some of the fight scenes. The fight scenes in the prison are just like the fight scenes in the rest of the movies. They're fucking great. I love the one in the bathroom where he's just like staring in the bathroom stall and it keeps building up and building up because you know somebody's trying to break in. And then when they break in, you just see like the fucking knob on like the stall break. And then music comes in. It's just, it's fantastic. I love it.
Watching the scene in the bathroom gives me the sensation of like drowning. Because it's so like, he's like, there's just this wall of guys coming after him and he's just destroying them.
And he's got 2 feet to work with like 20 guys coming at him.
And I think we said the same thing in The Raid Redemption, but it's the same. the fights in this, less so than in The Raid Redemption, because this movie is a little bit, I think, campier, but
Yes.
they do like hurt to watch at times, to see the hits that people are taking and giving.
100%. I will say I think that the first movie, the violence is way more visceral than in this movie for the most part. But at the same time, you're working on just a much bigger scale, and the movie has a different feel to it.
Yeah, it's a different
It's
tone.
not necessarily worse or better. It's just different. That's the way I would describe it.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And then also the prison riot fight scene's great because it's in the middle of like once again, a rainy prison yard. It's muddy as shit. It's just down and dirty. Like people, it's not well choreographed. Like, well, I mean, it's obviously well choreographed, but it's not like
it's messy.
It's messy, exactly.
Messy looking.
And like people are slipping everywhere and just
like it's great.
And there's a couple really funny moments in that, or not, I shouldn't say funny, but just like holy shit moments. Like there's one guy who just rips open a guy's jaw like in King Kong.
But I was just thinking about that. Yeah, lots of stabbings in the riot scene. Well, the stabbings in this movie are tough for me to watch. You just see a lot of bleeds going into bodies, a lot of noises. Ugh.
Yeah, no, and of course there's riot cops, or I should say riot officers in here who like shoot people trying to escape and stuff, and like the riot. The fucking cop riot guys just come in with like batons and beat people up. Like it is a very messy scene. I mean, obviously I assume it's well choreographed, but it is very messy.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, it's stylized in a different way where it looks chaotic. It looks kind of disorienting.
And then after the prison riot, the film jumps about 2 years in the future. Rama is released from prison and Uko picks him up to meet Bangun, who hires Rama out of gratitude. Now, I thought this was really funny because it's very clearly stated that and I should say very clearly shown as well, that both Ram and Uko clearly murder people in prison, but they still get out in 2 years. Like, what the fuck?
I don't know.
Man, Indonesian prisons are just like, well, if you got your initial charge, like if you get fucking a month in jail for like fucking loitering and you could kill 10 people, you still get out.
I mean,
what the fuck?
not just that they kill people, but they like actively take part in these extremely violent riots.
Yeah. Man,
like they are not rehabilitated.
To be fair, I mean, there was that one serial killer in like Brazil who killed like 60 people in prison, and he was eventually released.
See, that's a good country. That's prison reform.
Yeah, that's prison fucking Jesus Christ. Oh God. After doing some work for Bangun, Uko meets up with Rama, telling him that he is frustrated with his limited role in his father's organization and thinks that he deserves to be involved in Bangun's bigger operations.
This whole, because this is the scene, right? Or is this before that? And when they're with the hostesses?
This is before that.
Okay.
But I will get to that.
Well, because this guy captures so well, like fail son, rich kid energy.
Yes. And it's obvious that he's impulsive, he's angry, he's clearly cannot lead any kind of criminal enterprise.
There are reasons his father is not handing over this empire to him, but he just does not see it. He's just so bitter about feeling passed over, even though he's completely incapable of a leadership role. Yeah,
even though he fucking sucks. Like, I mean, there is a raid that the raid. But no, there's they have like a raid on an illicit pornography producer where they get some extra money from that. And I would say that Uko does pretty well, about as well as you could, getting the money from that. Yeah. However, it's still fairly impulsive and once again does not show his I would say, stunning ability to plan and avoid violence as much as possible. Now, I do want to highlight the illicit pornography scene because both these movies don't really have a whole lot of environmental storytelling, but this scene definitely does. But because you can see like the people like producing the discs where this porn is, and you can see the images that they have on there, and one of them is like a woman and a dog, and then one of them is like 2 little kids on it. Like it's pretty obvious that this is like an illegal, horrifically exploitative. And also there's a scene where a woman completely naked except for a strap-on comes out and basically like, why'd you pick up this hitchhiker? I can't fuck this guy's ass.
Yeah. Did that scene at all, the pornographers, did that remind you at all of the porn convention in 8mm? That
was exactly what I was thinking of with Machine and Dino, 100%.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that was a pretty, just like, you have to kind of rewind just to see some of the environmental storytelling. But, you can tell these guys are scumbags. Like, you can just tell. And thankfully, they all get murdered. So I hope that makes the audience feel better.
Yeah, this is one of the things that is interesting about this movie is that it's not a Godfather portrayal of, like, organized crime. It is
No.
very not operatic. It's maybe these guys think they're like that, but
Oh,
like,
yeah.
they're disgusting.
It's like in the past with mobsters in like the 20s and 30s, like Prohibition era. Like a lot of people think that the mobster movies, like mostly like pre-code mobster movies where they talk like that, like a lot of people nowadays think that mobsters just talk like that. But no, they made that up for the movie. And then mobsters got that as their accent, which is hilarious because that's obviously like the opposite of what people think.
Yeah. Al Capone had a reel of the movie Scarface, the 1932 Scarface. And he used to play it at parties and go, yeah, that's me. They were such phonies.
But yes, after this scene, we then get the hostess scene. Now, this is a great scene. Probably, I would say my single favorite scene of Uko's because it really does show just the entitlement, the privilege, and just the hostility and anger that this guy has. It's perfect. And also for being a pretty boy, this actor, he's a pretty good fucking actor in this role.
No, it's one of my favorite performances in the movie. I hate him so much.
Yeah, he's completely contemptible. Like, you do hate this fucking character I would say by like the 3-minute mark that he's on the movie. Like, it's just like...
Yeah.
But yeah, so the hostess scene, he's basically like tormenting these hostesses because he's just angry that his dad wouldn't let him play with what he assumes is rightfully his, and then he like harasses them and attempts to like assault them and stuff. It's a pretty rough scene to watch, obviously.
I think he indicates to one of them that he's going to sexually assault her later that evening. Yeah.
It's rough. But Rama uses this opportunity while he's distracted outside of the hostess club to secretly plant a bug in Uko's wallet. And the synopsis that I have did not include this whole side plot for some reason, so I decided to include it. We then get a short side plot with the character of Precoso, played by Yayan Ruhuyan, who was Mad Dog in the first movie. And even though this was a very fan service thing to put in here, I loved it. I love Precoso. I love this fucking ragtag, just like fucking homeless looking assassin.
Yeah. I mean, I like it. If you take out this scene, you lose one of the big connections that makes this a sequel.
Yes. And this is also the only character in the movie that a actor from the first movie reprised that they did not play the same actor because, of course, Mad Dog died in the first movie.
Yeah.
But once again, we get Precoso here, who is one of Bangun's most trusted assassins. And I put in my notes here, he looks like an unwashed vagrant and is a divorced guy, which is great. He's just this badass
he's
assassin.
Such a divorced guy.
Yeah. Just like in the first movie with Mad Dog. And in the first movie with Mad Dog, he's like, he's just like this like scummy, like fucking just guy that gets his hands dirty. But in this movie, he's like, well, I do all that, but also I'm really sad that I don't get to see my son.
He's a father's rights activist.
Yeah, he is. Oh, shit. But Uko sets up Precoso at a club to be killed because he has teamed up with Bejo, essentially, to, I think, kind of undermine his dad's authority and also get back at the Japanese, if I'm not mistaken, to a certain extent.
Yes.
So he's he's trying to kill Precoso to try to, like, drive a wedge in between this criminal syndicate. Because in this movie, the Japanese and the Indonesians are kind of at, like, a very uneasy truce. But a stable uneasy truce, if that makes sense.
Uko represents it. I mean, he's this younger generation who has this feeling of animosity because he feels stepped over, like he's acting, but also a lot of kind of like nationalist, like kind of resentment inside of him that he can't temper the way that his elders have. He doesn't feel that they should have to temper it. Yes.
And then ultimately Precoso gets killed. He gets attacked at first by like 30 guys in a club, but he makes his way out of the club. But a very weakened Precoso, while clutching a locket with his son's picture in it, gets murdered by one of Bejo's assassins, played by the actor Sesip Arif Rahman. And yes, I did want to just make it clear, I did tell the synopsis out of order, but I did need to include Precoso because honestly, the fact this original synopsis I found did not include him is criminal to me.
It's pretty important because, again, it's one of the few things that really ties this thematically and literally to the first film.
Yes, 100%. So I did tell the synopsis just a little bit out of order, so let's try to get back into the correct order here. But once again, we're talking about how one of Bejo's assassins killed Precoso. We find that Uko meets Bejo once again, who shares rumors of a plot to turn Reza, that corrupt police chief from earlier, and others against his father. Bejo allows Uko to kill the gang members responsible for the prison riot, and they hatch a plan to start a gang war between Bangun and Goto, so Uko can prove his worth to his father, and Bejo can take part of Goto's territory. Now, you're talking about, like, a lot of the violence in this movie. This scene, which is also reminiscent of another scene from the first movie, where Uko kills the gang members, is pretty fucking hard to watch. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah. Yes. There's something very...
It's like a slaughterhouse.
Yeah, very weird about how... Yeah, it's very like slaughtering animals. And there's also something about something with kind of like... I don't know, maybe you didn't read it this way. Sort of some like BDSM vibes to the way that he's...
Yeah, because they're all tied with their hands behind their back in their underwear and shit.
Yeah, and he's kind of grabbing their heads. He calls one of them good boy right before he stabs the last one in the throat.
Yeah.
He quiets him down, and as the guy quits squirming, he says good boy, and then stabs him in the throat. Very disturbing.
It's actually, so even though this movie is way better than most of this show, although I will say this was definitely a highlight season, there's actually the very first scene in season 5 of The Walking Dead is literally this scene.
Yeah?
Yeah. I will say, I would never recommend getting into watching The Walking Dead, but there are definitely moments of that show that, oh my god, are some of the best moments in television I've ever seen, but they're very few and far between.
I think I'm good.
You're totally good. But I will say, yeah, and spoilers for the audience at home, if you haven't seen a season of an episode, or an episode of a season that's like 10 years old at this point, but the very first scene of season 5 is where some of the main characters of the show are lined up in a trough at a slaughterhouse where they're killed by having their throats slit so cannibals can eat them.
I do respect a show that does that to its main cast.
And does that on a primetime television show.
I mean, if you're going to do a zombie apocalypse,
Yeah, no, for sure. Uko then tries to convince Bangun that Precoso's death is caused by Gato's men, but Bangun refuses to retaliate. Frustrated, Uko tells Bejo to have his two hitmen, the siblings Hammer Girl and Baseball Batman.
These are my two favorite characters in the movie.
Yeah, these guys rock.
So finish what you're saying and we'll talk about these characters.
But yeah, so once again, Hammer Girl and Baseball Batman kill several of Gato's men. When Bangun and Gato meet to discuss the situation, Uko lashes out in anger, embarrassing Bangun into conceding territory. Bangun angrily then beats Uko when they return to his office, berating him for meaninglessly disrupting the peace between the two organizations, which Bangun is correct in this assumption.
Yeah, he's objectively correct.
And I also love this scene where Bangun and Gato discuss the various happenings that have been going on, because it's a once again, beautiful multicultural scene. Yeah, people speaking, whichever Indonesian language, I assume like Javanese or something like that, which is Jakarta area, I believe, and then Japanese. And then halfway in between, Uko and Gato's son start speaking English to each other. And I forgot that scene was in there. I'm like, wait, did I actually put the dub on?
Yeah.
And then, I thought it was really good. And I will say, once again, obviously, the actor who plays Uko is half German, and I believe partially grew up in Germany. So I assume that, I know in Germany, they tend to speak English, or I should say they tend to learn English and understand it well enough.
Yeah.
But I will say their English is fantastic.
Yeah, no, it is.
Very seamless, which is why I thought I put the dub on by accident.
Well, one of the things, this might not play into the bit with them speaking English, but I don't want to understate that the tensions between these two gangs, they are based in like ethno-nationalist differences. I think that's an important part of the subtext that would make it different from like, say, an American and Italian mafia war, like Two Clans fighting. Like, this is kind of a different thing.
Yes, and while Bangun is berating and beating his son, Uko goes like, wait, you came to them and groveled and spoke in their own language?
To them in their own language, on our land, yeah.
Yeah, on our land. Right. Which I will say, to be fair, if you're Indonesian, I can imagine probably why you hate the Japanese, because the Japanese were not very kind to really any of their colonies during World War II. But... Well,
that's how I read that scene. I think that's a very compelling insight into Uko, which doesn't make him less a psycho or a dumbass. It's an interesting insight into sort of what this gang world is and sort of the baggage that the people involved are bringing to it beyond, their criminal enterprising, business.
Yeah, whereas like Bangun and Gato, and to a slightly lesser extent, Gato's son, they're all just like, we're all just in it for the business. Like, as long as you don't have to kill anybody and you're not taking too much of my land or money, I don't really give a fuck, because they're old, seasoned gangsters. They know that it's best to keep a stable peace than it is to potentially gain more by just murdering everybody in your path. And Uko just has piss and vinegar. That's all he's got.
Which you can assume that maybe at some point the others felt that way when they were his age, and they just happened to survive long enough that they outgrew it.
Yes. And there's actually a scene as well after the illicit porn distributor is killed when they're burying his body where Ben-Gun kind of mentions that at the pond when they drop his body off.
Yeah.
Essentially, there's some dialogue that kind of indicates that. Meanwhile, Rama is suddenly attacked by Reza's corrupt cops. And this scene's great because Rama gets attacked in a car and runs away. And then they end up at a restaurant where one of the corrupt cops gets his like face burned on a fucking grill or something, or like on a stove.
Yeah, as I said, an homage to the film Beverly Hills Ninja.
Yeah. But then, yeah, as that guy is probably just horrifically, like, essentially burning to death on the inside,
yeah.
Rama sees a police badge on him, which, by the way, why would you carry a police badge on you when you're doing
an
why
even
like
have
this?
it?
Just not, yeah, makes no sense. But while Rama is recovering from the attack back at Ben-Gun's base, he is urgently called to Ben-Gun's office by Ben-Gun's advisor, Ika. Now, we don't mention Ika earlier, but he's a very important character. He is Ben-Gun's most trusted advisor in the office. He's essentially the guy that like chauffeurs Uka around and essentially is kind of his handler to a certain extent.
Yeah, it is possible to read into this him as Ben-Gun's adoptive son, who he maybe like admires more than his actual son Uko. I don't know if that's there. It would occur to me that that's a possible reading into these three characters' dynamic.
Yeah, he's essentially Ben-Gun's like cleaner or fixer. And also, I know I've mentioned this similarity a million times, but Ika very much reminds me of a younger version of Mike Ehrmantraut from Breaking Bad, like almost to a T.
Okay.
But yeah, so the synopsis that I have didn't mention Ika earlier, but he also...
That's weird, because I could kind of understand not mentioning that other scene, because again, you could take it out of the movie. I think it's stupid not to mention it, because it adds something to the themes.
Yes.
Ika is like an important character throughout the film.
Yeah, so I'm surprised it took him this long to get to it, but hey, it is what it is. And Ika as well also has a line of dialogue where he says to Rama, like, we both came from the same place, which is, we think earlier, assuming that Ika also came from, like, humble beginnings, ended up in jail, and eventually ended up as a fairly high up in Ben-Gun's association. But there might be another connection there that he's not quite being as blatant about. But while Rama makes his way to Ben-Gun's office, Bejo arrives with the assassin and a mob of henchmen. Uko finally reveals his betrayal by killing his father and wounds Ika. Now that, obviously, you know, Ben-Gun is a horrible monster in his own right, but he didn't have to go out like that.
Well, so this is a great scene because I think you see in Ben-Gun and Uka, you see like real pain between them in that moment before Uka shoots him. You see real like conflict there and real like inner torment about what he's going to do and feels he has to do. It's just a very good scene.
But yeah, once again, Uko wounds Ika, and before Bejo can finish Ika off, Rama arrives and gives Ika the chance to escape, but is subdued by the assassin. And it's interesting, so, you know, just like with Mad Dog in the first movie, Rama can generally take on any goon by himself, but once the big goon shows up, he's just no match. So
yeah,
I thought that was...
I guess you could argue, I was thinking about this, you could argue that maybe the idea is that by the time the big guy shows up, he's already fought like a dozen little guys and he's worn down or something. Maybe.
And he's also recovering from that ambush from earlier. Yeah. So he's not at his full strength. He's only at 20% of his power level or whatever. Like,
I mean, that really, I mean, Rama is basically superhuman. Like, as much as this is a gangster film, I'm not joking. He is. Yeah. He's like a fucking Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee character. He's, you know, he's 100%. That level of like martial arts kind of like, you know, superhero character.
No, for sure. But yes, once again, Rama is subdued by the assassin and driven away to be executed. Now, on the way to Bejo's hideout, Ika rescues Rama in a violent car chase. Now, this is the one we mentioned that streets were closed off for 12 hours a day. This is maybe not the highlight of the movie action-wise, but it is definitely the biggest set piece of the movie.
It's big. I mean, for me, there's a lot of great like action scenes in this. So this was not the one that made the biggest impression on me, but it did occur to me like, God, I bet this was cool. Like on a big screen in the theater. I bet this was like an experience.
100%. And you can tell, like, I mean, they're actually driving real cars and crashing them and like letting people out to be. And there's one guy who gets shot 15 times in the head and then gets ran over by a car. It's just
it's like a gore film for a second.
Which, once again, this movie had a budget of $4.5 million. There are movies that are made for $45 million, for $90 million, for $150 million that look worse than this movie.
That look worse and don't even attempt to do the types of like set pieces this film does.
If this was Marvel, they would do it in a fucking green screen lot. That's what the fuck and it would look terrible for a budget that's 100 times
the rest
bigger.
Of the money.
Yeah. But yeah, Ika is mortally wounded in this car chase, but he does save Rama in the end. He drives to like an abandoned neighborhood, and Ika informs Rama that he knows he's working undercover and that he is also an undercover officer. So that's when he said, we came from the same place. That's what he was implying. Which, by the way, that takes a lot of balls to imply that in front of your crime boss. So that probably wasn't very smart, but hey, whatever. I guess it worked. And unfortunately, Ika then dies, which I actually really liked the shot where you actually see him die.
Yeah, me too.
Rama lets him out of the car and he like on the couch of this like abandoned neighborhood, and then you just see him like slunch over.
Yeah.
Like, rest in peace, Ika. You did your best.
I mean, as characters in this movie go, other than Rama, he is one of the closer things maybe to a good guy.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because it is definitely not Bunawar, because he is putting his guy in way too much danger. Like, constantly. Yeah. He doesn't give a fuck about Rama at all.
No, he doesn't. He's an asshole.
Other than presumably protecting his family, that's about all he does.
I kind of think we're supposed to interpret that he does not really care about Rama's family.
No, 100%. Yeah, and there's like a phone call that Rama has where he's just like, you should have told me Ika was involved too. And he's like, oh, that fucking asshole? He got 10 of my guys killed. I don't give a fuck about him. Like, it's just... But Gato's henchman, Ryuichi, informs Gato of Uko's betrayal and that Reza is meeting Beijo and Uko at Beijo's hideout. Lieutenant Bunawar informs Rama that the gang war has escalated after the police commissioner has been killed. He also informs Rama of the meeting between Reza, Beijo, and Uko. Still shaken after killing his father, Uko discovers Rama's bug in his wallet. He also notices Beijo has the same tattoo as one of the gang members who tried to kill him during the riot, who is also the last guy that he kills in the lineup when Beijo like gives him the gang members from earlier to slaughter with. And by the way, I should mention, it's rough to watch because obviously he's just killing 5 guys by slitting their throats. He's also doing it with a box cutter. Like, it's a very ugly way to do it.
It's nasty.
And I liked that touch because it just shows how like just viscerally repulsive Uko is as like a personality. That like he could have just like shot
Uko's
these guys.
A rich kid who
he treats people as playthings.
Yeah, he's bitter that his dad doesn't respect him. His dad doesn't respect him because he's a stupid piece of shit rich kid who can't take care of anything, can't use his brain. He takes it out by murdering low-level thugs in the grossest way he can and abusing, sex workers, hostesses, whatever you want to say.
Essentially, yeah. It's not a great character.
I think he's cool, mostly. I mean, I wouldn't do the stuff he does, but it's cool.
You respect it.
I respect it. You need people like him so you can point your fingers and say that's the bad guy.
Yeah. But then after the tattoo showing there, Uko finally realizes that he's only been used as a pawn by Beijo, which you would kind of think about. Like, don't you think there should have been a suspicion the entire time? Like,
this is really good because the whole deal with Uko, like we're getting to, he feels disrespected by his father, right? He feels like they see him as stupid and as a kid. So because he's an idiot, he's like, I'm finally going to earn respect. I'm going to team up with these guys and start this gang war. But right after killing his father, destroying his father's legacy and kind of his own legacy that he probably eventually would have gotten something of, burns that down because he's like, well, I'm going to be my own man. And then he's sitting with these 2 guys and they're like mocking him to his face. The other associate comes to meet with them and calls him sidekick. And he says something to the other. He says, I'm not here to meet him regarding Uko, and says like, oh, you sure talk a lot, don't you? And keeps calling him sidekick, Yeah. And in that moment, there's this realization that like, oh, it's not that people don't respect you because your dad's an asshole. People don't respect you because you're an idiot and you're a child and you've destroyed everything that you had and still nobody respects you.
It's like fucking Uko after that realization, he's like Job from Arrested Development. I've made a huge mistake.
Yes, that's it. I made a huge mistake moment. It absolutely is.
But meanwhile, Rama attacks Beijo's restaurant warehouse and makes his way up, taking down Beijo's henchmen, including Hammer Girl and Baseball Batman. Now let's talk about Hammer Girl and Baseball Batman.
Yes.
So Hammer Girl is a very petite woman who uses hammers. That's her characterization. And also, I think she's like partially blind because one of her eyes is just fucked up. I noticed that.
And she wears sunglasses a lot.
Probably to cover that up. There's some self-consciousness there. And Baseball Batman, is he like deaf, or does he just do sign language as a way to like avoid suspicion? I'm not entirely sure.
I think he's deaf.
Okay, but yeah, he's a deaf guy who uses baseballs and baseball bats as his weapon.
These characters kick ass, and these are my favorite thing about this movie, and they kind of encapsulate everything that made me like this more than The Raid Redemption. Also, when I talked to several friends of mine who also like The Raid Redemption, and like longtime internet friends and things, and what they all said was, I didn't like The Raid 2 very much, because I felt like it was so totally different. They felt like it was a cartoon, and it didn't have the grittiness of the first one, which is true in some ways. Here's the thing. These characters would not have been in The Raid Redemption. They are too much like cartoons. They're like fucking Bond villains. They're like Bond henchmen. They're awesome.
Honestly, the closest thing in The Raid Redemption to these guys are the Machete Gang, but they're not cartoonish.
That's not even close.
They're like zombies. Like, they're actually like kind of scary.
Yeah, so let's talk about favorite character of the movie. It's a Baseball Batman. Ninja Baseball Batman.
Yeah, Ninja Baseball Batman.
He's deaf, speaks through sign language. He sneaks around corners. He eyes his target, points to his target, the person he's there to assassinate, like Babe Ruth calling his base, right? Yes. Then he takes a little baseball out of his pocket, throws it up, hits it with a baseball bat. The baseball flies over, crushes his target in the head, almost without, or in the spine, crushing their spine, knocking them over. Almost always hits them. If he doesn't hit them, the ball will be nearby. There's a scene earlier on. I know we're at Rama's final showdown with him. The scene that introduces us to Baseball Batman. We watch him crush a guy's head with the baseball by just beaming a baseball into this guy's head. Then, missing his associate, the baseball bounces off and next to this other guy that he's had to take out. And he says to the guy, "Give me the ball." The guy then in a panic throws the ball away. And Baseball Batman says, "That was a mistake," and just bludgeons him to death with the bat. Yeah. It's so great. He's my favorite character. And then the setup, so you see him and Hammer Girl both massacring people in different areas intercut. So this is our introduction to them, and then they disappear for a while. During Rama's ascent up to the kitchen, when we see them both again, we don't see them right away. We see the baseball hit the wall in front of Rama and roll to his feet.
Yes.
And then he turns a corner, and they're both standing there. And Baseball Batman says, "Give me the ball." And that leads into our fight scene. It's so cool.
And also, I know you mentioned this as a similarity, and I'm glad you did, but it was very reminiscent of the old boy scene in the hallway.
It so is. It's more heightened than that scene. But yeah, our introduction to Baseball Batman is basically like him taking on a gang with his baseball bat. And there is absolutely no way, inconceivable, that was not a knowing homage to Old Boy.
Oh, yeah, no, 100%. So, yeah, eventually Rama does get the better of them, although it's a pretty close fight. It is a very close fight. And
also a nice touch. Finally, Rama gets the upper hand of Hammer Girl and grabs her throat and is about to rip it open. And we see Baseball Batman cry, "No!" And then we're like, oh, they were a couple. Oh. That's how I read that anyways.
And also, the main fight showpiece of the movie, Rama gets into the kitchen of this warehouse where Beijo is headquartered, and the unnamed assassin shows up who has a weapon called a karambit, which is like it's like a multi-sided, like it almost looks like a star to a certain extent or something like that, right?
Yes.
But essentially it's like a short little knife, and that's what his primary weapon is. It's like a distinct like stabbing tool. Like, that's the best way to describe it.
It's like it would hook into your body from different directions.
Oh, yes. That's the best way to put it. Yes, 100%. And apparently, I'm looking it up right now because I didn't even know what it was called until I read the synopsis here. It is the main, like, weapon that people who practice silat, which is the Indonesian martial art that's primarily in these movies, would use. So I thought that was very interesting. And it comes from Sumatra. Very cool stuff.
Oh, yeah. This fight scene... It is fantastic.
It's fantastic. And it is very reminiscent, as I mentioned earlier, about with the Mad Dog, Andy, and Rama fight scene in the first movie. It's very reminiscent of that for me.
It's a fight that I think we said this in the Redemption review about that scene. This fight goes on forever. It feels like it's never going to end. At the same time, it does not feel boring or drag at any point.
It is. I think we mentioned in the Raid Redemption as well when we talked about that Mad Dog final fight. It's like, what did we describe it as, like operatic or something like that?
Yes. Yeah, we did.
And this movie, it's very similar to that too. Like it plays like an operatic stage play. It's not necessarily like a down and out fight like the mud prison yard fight.
Yeah, no, this is almost the opposite because there's sort of an idea. So when Rama steps into the kitchen staff clears out. Unnamed assassin, who I think is also sort of portrayed as maybe being the head chef.
He is almost kind of wearing like a chef's outfit.
Yeah. I think the rest of his team leaves, and I think we're supposed to read him as being like running the kitchen in addition to being like the highest level bodyguard, which is again kind of like almost like a Bond type thing. In the first stage when they begin fighting, they both pose themselves, and there's sort of like an aspect of like elegance to the way they're fighting. You know, like they're kind of warming up by acknowledging that they're both kind of like peak fighters before they're really like trying to kill each other.
Yeah, no, it's a great fucking scene. I enjoyed every minute of it, and it once again is very much the action highlight of the film, which makes sense because it's also one of the last scenes of the movie. So
yeah, I mean, this is in the tradition of like a great martial arts fight scene. I know it's just very compelling. It's again when we said it up top of this episode, you can't really be acting when you're taking these kind of hits. You know, at some point you're really taking them, even if it's choreographed. And this scene, you know, you see these guys doing every bit of it.
For sure. And then the very last scenes here, after that epic fight, Rama is victorious. He finally makes his way to Bejo and disrupts the meeting between Uko, Reza, and Bejo. Bejo attempts to shoot Rama, but Uko manages to shoot and kill Reza and Bejo first, which I thought was very interesting because essentially Rama is doing this to get revenge for his brother and essentially to protect his family from who he probably rightfully assumes are goons that are going to come after and kill his family. But before he even has a chance to do that, fucking Uko does it first in like a completely opportunistic moment because he was slighted earlier, which I thought was almost kind of like a tragic thing. Yeah.
It sums up his whole deal.
And also, I mean, at this point, Rama is just so fucking exhausted. Probably the only thing he's thinking of is, I just want to get this over with so I can fucking leave. And like, Uko is just like, these guys slighted me, fuck you, dead. And it's just great. Like, before Uko can kill Rama as well, Rama throws the karambit at him and stabs him to death, which also, I think we can all agree, Uko was just taken out way too soon. I liked him. He was a good character, and he was a good person.
He never got his shot to show what he could do as the boss.
Yeah.
Also, that hostess was very rude to him.
She was very rude to him. Honestly, you know what? Women are slut. No, I won't go in the incel route. I'm not doing that.
Well, we'll wait until we get to like an episode where we talk about like the descendants or something.
But yes, after Rama kills Uko, he, weakened and exhausted, limps away from the premises and encounters Gato's men, led by Gato's son Kichi, who we mentioned earlier, who were sent to attack the meeting. And we also see Bunawar finally drives to the site, I assume, to either get intel or basically just be like, hey, Rama, thanks for helping us out, but we actually don't have enough evidence. You're going to have to keep doing this. Because I don't know why the fuck they need more evidence. There's enough evidence to like put everybody away forever. Like, what the fuck do they still need to be undercover for? Just let him go home. Like Bunawar is such a fucking asshole in this movie. Fuck this guy.
Oh yeah, no, he's a piece of shit. He's a desk jockey.
But then in the very last scene, in the very last shot, we see Kichi smirk as he silently offers a deal to Rama, where we don't actually hear the deal, but we're kind of assuming it's like, hey, join me, I'll give you money, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, you did what I want, and we'll do this all over again, but instead of Bangun and Uko, it's going to be me. And you just see Rama just go, no, enough. And that's the end of the movie.
Well, he says, I'm done. And I'm going to tell you...
Or he does say, I'm done. Yes, he does say, I'm done.
So, and title screen shows up. No. I think we're on the same page. Pretty self-explanatory. What do you think gets to happen to Rama after that? You think he gets to just go home and they're like, okay, you're done?
I'm assuming that Rama probably gets murdered immediately.
Yeah, that's exactly... When he's saying, I'm done... Because I want to say, like, Rama we've seen take on... If he was at his top... could fight all these guys. He's against superhuman. When they barge in and we hear them talking to him, offering him this deal, he's like about to fall over. He's so exhausted, he's like bleeding out.
He also gets shot in the side, just grazed with a shotgun bullet. Like, he's dead. He's dying. It's like in Drive, because I remember there were some people who were like, in the reviews, like, we should have a sequel where Mr. Drive comes back.
He's
it's like,
dead.
No, Drive is dead. Mr. Driver is dead. He's dying. He's dead. Like, there is no coming back.
Well, yeah, it's like a Thelma and Louise ending. Yeah, okay, we know that we don't see the car crash, but like they didn't make it to the other side of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in this sense, this mob of guys is a proverbial Grand Canyon.
Yes, and you know that, I mean, there is like a large amount of interest in the fan base of these movies for a third Raid movie. I just don't think it needs to happen. The original premise for one filmmaker said would be that it would be written so it takes place 2 hours before the end of the Raid 2. That's this film. But I just don't see why that needs to exist.
I don't either. And Gareth Evans, I assume he just wants to make different movies at this point. He made like 4 movies in Indonesia. I assume he wants to do different shit.
Yeah. We actually didn't talk about this up top, but it's an important thing, and I was waiting to get into it. This movie, and we said it, but I'll get into more detail here, was not supposed to be a sequel to The Raid Redemption. Gareth Evans wrote, I think he might have even said he wrote this before The Raid Redemption or around the same time. It's a separate movie. It was not about an undercover cop. It was about the character that became Rama after he redeveloped it, who is a gangster who's working to prevent this bloody gang war because it'll throw the city into chaos. Basically the same story as we get, but you make him undercover cop so you can make him Rama in The Raid Redemption. Because what happened was he couldn't fund this film. This is a very ambitious movie. And again, they made it for $4 million. So they made a pretty ambitious movie with a pretty small budget. Like, he found a way to do it.
Yeah.
But he was only able to do that after The Raid Redemption became this kind of like big success, or, pretty big success on a very small budget. And so he has this other crime thriller that's very different. Like, again, it's totally different. The themes are pretty different. I'm going to be honest. If I wanted to be pedantic, would say there's no Raid in this movie, so there's no reason to call it The Raid 2.
Yeah, no, that is true.
So the whole idea that we need that of fans saying there should be a Raid Part 3, well, there really didn't need to be a Raid Part. And I like this movie more than the first one, to be clear. The only reason there's a Raid 2 is because that was the easiest way for him to get this story made. This story didn't even have to be a sequel to The Raid Redemption. They're pretty distinct.
Yeah. So of course, if the Raid Redemption wasn't a sleeper hit, and then of course if he wasn't able to get the money from selling off the rights to make an American remake, that thankfully never happened, there probably would have never been a sequel to this movie, or even the adaptation of this film that wouldn't even been a Raid sequel in the first place. Yeah. So there were a lot of confluences that had to happen for this small time. Once again, he's not even Indonesian, a Welsh director moving to Indonesia to make movies. A demographic not known for making large budgeted movies, or frankly, let's be honest, legal movies either, because Westerners going to Indonesia to make films, usually not a good thing.
I was not going to say that, but I was thinking the same thing.
But this guy did it for good reasons. So, Gareth Evans, you're the one white Westerner to go to Indonesia for good reasons.
But, well, we could argue that, again, part of the reason he was able to get these movies made in Indonesia is because it's literally illegal to have people do stunt work like this in America.
Yeah, 100%, yes. Like, the fact that Iko Uwais and, in the first movie, Joe Taslim, these guys, I mean, they're, top-tier action stars, but when they do American movies, you can clearly tell they're not doing stuff that is in the Raid. I saw Joe Taslim, he was Sub-Zero in the most recent Mortal Kombat movie. Now, granted, the action in that movie is pretty good for an American film, but it is nowhere near as visceral as in this movie.
No.
Not even
corporate insurance won't cover stunt work like this, and most actors guilds won't permit it. And that's not a knock against them. It's probably a good thing. But I'm just saying that is part of the reason you don't see Western action films like this. And you never have. Even in the 70s, at the peak of the genre, you didn't.
No, 100%.
There are a few scenes in this movie that connected explicitly to the first film and kind of remind you that Rama is the same guy from the first movie. But you take those scenes out, you basically have a standalone film.
100%, yes. And that is why I said that, and also my recommendation for this, and I'll get into my true, complete thoughts at the very end after we get into the Amazon reviews, but I will say this one last thing on my end, is I honestly don't know whether I like this movie or the Raid Redemption more. I think they're pretty much equal quality to me. And I would say to the audience at home, unlike Born Losers and Billy Jack, whereas Billy Jack is objectively a better movie than Born Losers.
The clear better.
But I would recommend to the audience at home, if you have the time, if you have, 4 hours to spare, I think, a little over 4 hours. If you have 5 hours to spare, I would recommend just watching these movies back to back and form your own opinion, because I think it really is the only divisive thing in this movie quality wise is whether you like the first one or the second one more.
Yeah.
Like, just that similar in quality, and they're equally good movies, but in different ways. It's wild.
Yes. 100% agree. And by the way, like, there's a lot of different demographics that these can appeal. If you like neo-noir, you like gangland thrillers, if you like straight up like gunfighter movies, if you like classic like martial arts films, you'll probably find a lot to like. If you like one of those 4 things, you'll find a lot to like in the Raid Redemption and the Raid 2. But I think whether you like 1 or 2 more, because I agree, they're same quality. They're both great. They're just very distinct. Will depend on if you prefer a very gritty, serious movie or, a more heightened kind of, I don't know, like almost fantastical movie.
Yeah, like if you like your action movies like claustrophobic and like gritty and almost like horror movies, then The Raid is probably the first one is probably your favorite. But yeah, if you like neo-noir, if you like crime movies, if you like movies that are like just over the top, they're kind of goofy. If
you like Tarantino?
Yeah, like Tarantino, like The Raid 2 will probably be your preferred. But like I said, they're just equally good movies that I really don't know which one I like more. I will say if I'm looking to just see a movie where people get their asses kicked and just go to bed, it would probably be The Raid. But if I'm looking for a movie,
it's got 60
it's also
minutes
50
shorter.
minutes shorter, exactly. Yeah. But if I'm looking for a movie that's, once again, neo-noir film, if I'm looking for a film that has a more serious, like, narrative structure, if I want to see movies with better performances from the actual actors themselves, The Raid 2 is definitely it. So it's just to the audience at home, watch both movies and form your own opinion. I'm genuinely serious on that.
They're both great movies. Truly. Can't go wrong.
Hell yeah.
It is like saying, do you like Alien or Aliens more? Actually, I think that's a really apt comparison when you said that at the beginning, the more I think about it.
Yeah, 100%. And then speaking of opinions, let's get into some Amazon reviews. Now, believe it or not, there weren't that many Amazon reviews that had people recommending them. So I found the ones that I could find that had 10 or more people saying this review was helpful. And I only have 3 of them, actually, believe it or not, out of like the 4,000 reviews on Amazon, which is very bizarre.
It is strange.
Yeah, it is. Keith JM gives this 5 stars, and the head of the review says, the greatest action film ever made. And the body of the review says, now this is in all caps, all of it, but I'm not going to scream it. I'm just going to yell it. The Raid 2 has gone far beyond my godly expectation and has left me in a state of sheer astonishment. Gareth Evans and everybody at TT Marintow Films are simply the greatest action filmmakers of all time. They have taken inspiration from the greatest action filmmakers who have come before them to create what is simply put the greatest action film ever made. This film will forever be in the pantheon of the greatest films ever made. This film is history in the making. This film has the ability to cure all severe illnesses and cure everything else as well. If you do not experience this film for yourself, you will never ever have a fulfilled life. Smiley face. And that's the review.
Do we think, and I don't disagree with most of this. I have a couple qualms with that last bit. I think that might be irresponsible to say, especially in this era where there's so much, can enter at, the medical profession. But otherwise, I'd say I agree. But do we think that this is a very excited 15-year-old who just saw this, or a funny English as second language speaker?
You know what? I'm going to guess both. So the reason why I think it's both is because there's sentences and there's punctuation, and Americans who do this kind of thing aren't very good at punctuation or anything like that. So I'm assuming it is a foreign language person, because hilariously enough, a lot of foreign language, or I should say non-Americans who have English as their second language, actually have pretty good English second language skills that they post on the internet, I've noticed. Yeah,
that's true.
And then also the super fan part, because it's in all caps and it's got if this movie will make you happy, blah, blah, blah. And it's very teenage super fan of a movie.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
It's actually a very funny review, because I'm it's actually fairly well put together, but all in caps and goofy. So I like it.
Yeah, agreed.
And then the next review here we have is from Justin McCoy, who gives this 5 stars. And the head of the review says, one of the best action films ever, exclamation point. And the body of the review says, I watched this right after watching The Raid Redemption. I was amazed at how the violence escalated even more and that this film is now one of my all-time favorites. They don't make action films like this in America, and those are watered down and soft compared to how these are made. Now, we did mention probably why that's the fact, though. So, like, because this is not legal to do in America.
Yeah, I mean, he's not wrong.
Loaded with bullets, hand-to-hand combat, car chases, and executions make for a very action-packed and bloody film. If you are a fan of hardcore action films that take no prisoners, then this one is for you. So, overall, pretty solid review.
Yeah, pretty good. I see a lot of people saying that they feel like this is an all-time great action movie. I wouldn't disagree with someone or think someone was an idiot if they said that The Raid 2 and The Raid Redemption were all-time great action movies. I don't know if I love them that much, because there's a lot of great action movies that I really love, you know?
No, for sure. So when you think of like great action, like the best action movies, you think of like S tier. I would say that these are like solid A+ tier action.
Sure.
Movies.
I wouldn't disagree with that. Again, these might not be the first movies that pop into my head, but I wouldn't disagree with that ranking of them. You know, if I saw that ranking, I wouldn't be like, whoa, you know, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, you wouldn't be like, you think that, you normie. You wouldn't do that.
No.
And then the last review I have here, now this one was actually by far the highest recommended review, and it's actually a 1-star review, which is very interesting. So Andrew Ma, who I believe is the son of Jack Ma, but I could be wrong about that.
The nephew of Yo-Yo Ma?
Yeah. They give this 1 star, and the head of the review says, 1 star for Amazon's video service. The movie itself is 5 out of 5.
These people are fucking what blessed lives they live.
It's hilarious because this is the most recommended one too. That's the most fucked up part.
Well, you know what? Fuck Amazon. So I don't disagree, I guess.
Yeah, fuck Amazon. Now they've my last 2 packages are probably never gonna show up now. Straight up, like fuck Amazon.
Yeah, I just don't understand these people's brains where they're like, I'm reviewing Amazon, and like this is still you're rating the movie. Like I don't really understand what, like, you know, you can say like, hey, the movie's great, but this is a bad rating for Amazon, but you're still making that a rating towards the movie, and I don't care. I'm not like, oh, these poor movies getting a bad. It's just like I just don't understand how the person that does this brain works, and there's always at least one person. Every episode we have someone doing this.
Yeah. It's just never the number one. I will say the one exception I may make is the Superman one, where they gave that specific release a 1 star, because I think that was just on the entry for the Blu-ray itself.
Yeah, that was fine, because that was about a product.
Yeah, it was not about, because like when you go on other reviews for that Superman DVD or Blu-ray, it was not on that one. So I'm like, okay, that's fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
But once again, they give this 1 star, and the body of the review says, long story short, definitely watch this movie if you like action, but do not buy/rent it from Amazon. Find a video service that provides the original Indonesian audio track, as the forced English dub will ruin the movie for you. This is coming from an English speaker who does not know a single word of Indonesian. The English audio track is beyond terrible, and it drains the emotion and gravity of every scene when a character speaks.
I'm going to tell you, I watched both.
Oh, you watched both the dub and the sub?
Yeah. Watched it with the sub for the first time, because of course I would. And then I figured I'd watch it with the dub, just because. Also, because it's easier for me to write. I would always rather have subtitles, but it was easier for me to write my notes and kind of do other things while watching on my second viewing. The dub is, I don't know, it's fine. I actually don't think, I mean, like, there was way, way worse dubs. It's fine.
No, for sure. And I, for the most part, like 99% of the time, if it's a foreign film, I would rather watch the sub versus the dub. Outside, the only exception I make is if it's a Funimation localization of an anime. That's it. That is the only difference. So good. Exactly. Like, you know,
that's how it was meant to be heard. You know what? When Akira Toriyama heard the Funimation dub of Dragon Ball, he said, "It's yours now.
Yeah,
you've captured it better than I ever could have."
Because, like, yeah, I mean, the original voice actor for Goku has been voicing them for 40 fucking years now or whatever.
Yeah, no, she's great.
But it's just like, when I think of Goku, I just don't think of like an 80-year-old Japanese woman. I just don't. I'm sorry. I know that probably is going to get me roasted.
Are you being serious right now?
Well, because for me, it's just
I thought we were doing a bit. No, I'm not. Just back up.
Well, no, I'm. Yeah. So I'm only saying that because I grew up with the American dub. I just can't see it
okay,
that
well,
way.
I thought you were doing a bit and I was going along with it. We gotta back up now. All right. I also grew up, like, we're the same age. We both grew up watching those on Toonami. I
Very
understand.
much so.
I just, all right, Taylor. I think we're done with this conversation.
Yeah.
I think we better get back to the movie. This might be the last episode of
Yeah.
Millennials Are Old.
Episode canceled. Yeah, no. Series canceled.
Yeah.
But yes, continuing on the review here, it says, I purchased the Raid 2 on Amazon a few years ago to watch for the first time and did not regret it at all. It was easily one of the most impressive.
So here we have a good review for renting it from Amazon.
Yeah, I think they do explain it though, so let's. And gruesome action movies I had ever seen, and I rewatched it many times since then. However, after revisiting the movie just now, I found that Amazon has forced the English dub on my video purchase. The English audio track contains immensely cheesy, dispassionate, and outlandish voice acting, if you can call it that.
I mean, come on, man. They're working actors. They do fine.
Yeah, I bet they're fine. After hearing just a few sentences, I could say for sure that I'd prefer to have the original audio with English subtitles, just like how it was when I first bought the movie. The worst part is that Amazon doesn't even give you a choice to revert it. There's only an English dub now, which I assume they must have changed that since then, right? Because I assume you rented this from Amazon?
Yeah, I did.
So I assume they have the sub and the dub now.
No, they only have the dub.
Really? How'd you find the sub one then?
Oh, you can get it on YouTube, actually. You can get it with subs.
Oh, okay, cool, good.
So I was like, you know what, I'm going to watch them both. Actually, that was because I got the Amazon one first, and I saw that it was dubbed, and I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So I found it with subs, but then I was like, well, now I have them both rented for the next 30 days. May as well watch them both. I don't know if the dialogue is like super cheesy in the dub. It is simpler. Like you can tell that they have kind of dropped some of the thematic things that they allude to and just made it very literal.
They generally tend to do that. I've noticed in dubs of like Asian films. They tend to do that a lot.
Well, what this won't surprise you. Some of the allusions to the like kind of ethno-national tension between the gangs is kind of flattened in the dub for pretty obvious reasons.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, you know, everyone that knows that the people that make dubs think that Americans are idiots and that they need everything, you know, smoothed over, which is fair enough. I mean, there's no reason to watch the dub if you have the sub available to you. If all you can get for some reason is that Amazon one, I mean, that's unfortunate, but it's fine.
Yeah. I would not rank it a 1-star over a 5-star. If you're going to give the movie 5-star, the dub's not that bad that you're going to give it a 1-star. I mean, if it was like genuinely egregious, like they got like people on the street and recorded it in like a bathroom stall, then maybe sure.
It sounds about on the level of like a pretty good 70s martial arts American dub. Like it's better than that. Like it's like the modern equivalent to that, you know?
Yeah, and like
so
Sony distributed this in the US. So like Sony's not going to get, like I said, random people recording it in a bathroom stall. Like they're going to get actual recording voice actors.
It was fine. Again, I'm just once more. If you can see it with subs, that's obviously better. Shouldn't have to tell you guys that. But,
agree.
You know.
There was one funny sub moment I missed. So like subtitles for the most part were very good. However, there was one funny spelling error where when they're at the hostess club and I think it was like Uko has the mic and Iko's like, give me the mic. And they spell it instead of M-I-C, they do M-I-K-E like the name Mike. I thought that was very...
Give me the mic.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny.
Give me the mic.
Yeah. And Mike's in the background like, bro, what the fuck?
The guy in the corner, going, oh, put me down.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it was pretty funny. But yes, those are all the Amazon reviews. Now let's get into our final thoughts here. As I mentioned earlier, both these movies are great. I would recommend just watching them back to back and forming your own opinion, because honestly, these movies are pretty much neck and neck in quality for me.
I don't think like I said, I talked to a lot of friends, and all my friends said that they loved the first one, didn't really like Raid 2 that much. I don't really understand that. They're pretty different, but I don't really see why you'd love one and not really like the other. For me, again, I think I liked the Raid 2 more because I like things that are a little bit more extravagant. I like things that are a little bit more, like this is a little bit more cartoony at times, but not still, like there's still some drama and some real human pathos and tension in it. I also, you'll remember that my big criticism, my personal distaste for the look of the Raid Redemption. I just don't like that very gray dreary look, and that there was a reason that the Raid Redemption looked that way. It was appropriate, it was fitting, but it isn't personally very appealing to me. So the diversity of scenery, the diversity of color in the Raid 2 was personally more appealing to me.
I just had a thought. So going back to that, do you think when Ika and Rama were going to that abandoned place where Ika to die, was that the apartment complex?
That hadn't occurred to me.
Do you think they were like purposely calling back to that from the first movie?
They were definitely calling back to the look of it.
Yeah. I don't know if that was like the apartment complex or at least the neighborhood.
If it was, that would make a lot of sense. Well, I will say that I think that the first 20 minutes or so of the Raid 2 intentionally look when he's in prison like part 1, where it's very gray and very concrete. And it kind of sets you up to think that this movie is going to be the same throughout tonally that the Raid Redemption was. And then once he's out of prison, there's this vast variety, like lots of neon lights, lots of, kind of this gangland thriller neo-noir world. And it's kind of like a bait and switch.
Yeah, it's very much like Southeast Asian, like just like design and color schemes throughout a lot of the sets, which I appreciate a lot. And we reviewed, of course, Drive with Nicholas Winding Refn. The next film of that, I can't remember what it was called. It's called Only God Forgives, and that's a movie that takes place in Thailand. And from what I've seen in the previews, it looks very similar, like looks-wise and color-wise and like shot composition as this movie.
I love the color and the composition of this movie.
It looks great. And, with the first movie, like the first movie is definitely not amateurish by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not the most dynamic filmmaking of all time when it comes to the actual like shot composition. Whereas this film, it's a lot more complex.
Well, also just the scope.
The scope of it too, yes.
Almost feels like a Corman film where it's like they found or made this great location and then they wrote a script for it. I don't think that's what happened, but it feels like it could have been that way.
Well, considering that the Raid 2 was meant to be a whole separate story and it was made only because the original was successful, that's certainly possible.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the feeling that I have. So I love the Raid 2 because it's got everything that I really loved about the Raid Redemption, but it's also got more things that just appeal to my personal biases in film. Your mileage may vary. If you like a more kind of grim, gritty, kind of like action adventure thing, you like a more claustrophobic, tense, very furious thing, you might like the Raid Redemption more. If you like something that may be hard, to me, this film really harkens back to like 70s exploitation, 70s gangster, 70s martial arts films in a way that the Raid Redemption doesn't. And that's what I love. I love that shit. So I'm gonna gravitate more to this than the Raid Redemption. But again, your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the Raid Redemption was like a modern action film, and obviously I think the nadir of like action films were like the late 2000s, early 2010s.
Yeah, I believe that very strongly.
Not a very strong era, but it took a lot of those things that were kind of, well, I shouldn't say kind of, were pretty bad about those, but made them in a palatable way. And were like
that's
really
what I
good.
thought watching it too. Yeah, because it's like all of the things that I typically don't like about action from that era, but it's all done with purpose, and you're all like, okay. And even though that's not what I tend to respond to in action movies, I'm still like, okay, this is good in this movie. It's like this for a reason.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that the first movie is like a contemporary like action movie, whereas the Raid 2 is very much like a throwback movie to a certain extent, which I thought was very interesting.
I kind of feel like maybe this movie, bigger budget, more abilities to do things. It's almost like, is this him being like, well, now I've got more of a money and more ability to do ambitious things, I'm going to make a movie that like I would have watched? Is it kind of like that, do you think?
I think so. Because from what I've seen from the synopsises of Gareth Evans' other films, it seems like he was trying to be more of like a serious filmmaker, and not say that the Raid Redemption is not a serious film, because obviously there's serious elements to it, but it's not like a seriously narrative, like a narrative, like seriously, kind of film. Like there's it's a action movie with very limited characterization, and it's like 95% action, 5% characterization. Like it's like
the seriousness of the Raid Redemption comes in how it was filmed and the precision and intensity of like the mood there. Yeah.
So in my opinion, I think that Gareth Evans is trying to do more of like narrative pictures and more like serious films with deep, complex characters.
Do you feel like this film is maybe him using the brand of the Raid Redemption to transition into that, to find a way to do that with this surprise hit that he had?
I would say yes, and obviously not cynically, because this was made even before,
No,
this was written
all.
even before The Raid Redemption
Yeah,
was.
no,
So.
not cynically.
So, but yeah,
when you have a hit in Hollywood, or not in Hollywood, but in film, I guess you got to use it because you don't know when you're gonna have your next one.
Yeah, shit, seriously. Although I do have one distinct negative for me, that this film is worse than the original. The soundtrack in this movie is passable. It's fine. There's no like distinct audio tracks. And part of the reason for that is, even though this movie does have the same music composer as the first movie, however, they're missing fucking Mike Shinoda in this movie. Yeah. And I think Mike Shinoda gave just a little bit of his personal flair to make a lot of the tracks in The Raid Redemption, because the music tracks in The Raid Redemption, I think, are very distinct in comparison to this movie. Like the scene in The Raid Redemption where they're like going through like the printing press area and there's like a guitar track.
There's kind of an industrial feel to that. You get glimpses of that in the score here, but not really any musicality, in my opinion, to it. It's more, sound kind of pastiche things.
Or like my favorite track in The Raid Redemption is when he's being chased by the Machete Gang and Rama takes him down. And it's almost like kind of like a jungle like backing track to a certain extent with like cymbals and shit. Like that song I think plays perfectly in that scene because it's like a horror movie scene. It's a guy running away from a gang with machetes who are just gonna run down a hallway and stab him to death and hack him to death.
The score for The Raid Redemption is sick. The score here is fine. There's even moments where, I mean, it always fits the scene. It always works, but I can't think of any moment watching this film in either of my viewings where I thought the score was like, oh, like, damn, this fucking slaps. Like, I thought of basically the whole soundtrack in The Raid Redemption. So that's a very good point.
So I would say that's one of the few things that this movie has a distinct negative on, but it's not really enough, once again, to make me say this movie's distinctly worse or distinctly better than the first movie. So yeah, once again, my final thoughts: watch both movies back to back if you have the time. If you love action, you will not be disappointed.
Yeah, if you love action movies, if you love gang films, if you love shootouts or martial arts, you're going to like both these movies. I just can't see otherwise. And which one you like better is going to depend on if you like something more serious or more over the top, I think. But they're equal in pretty much every way, except maybe the soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly. So you know what? Now that we've reviewed two movies now, one with, and they're both great movies, I think we should talk about, in our next episode, Brian, the sequel that we all know is the very best sequel of all time, the third Billy Jack film, which is just as good as the first two movies. I think you would agree.
Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of a teaser here. I love The Trial of Billy Jack. I kind of think that it might be Laughlin's masterpiece. All of them are passion projects. That is a bloated, big, wonderful, insane mess of a film. It's also the first one. Commercially, it did not do as well as Billy Jack. And, from there, it's a steady downward slope in terms of views. Trial of Billy Jack is insane. I don't know how many people even know about it now. I know people know the character Billy Jack exists, but that movie's wild. That is him. That's I feel like Billy Jack is set up to make that movie. Let's create this character who's going to be made a public spectacle, put on trial, so he can be a mouthpiece for all of my political activism.
Another thing that the Billy Jack movies have in common with this movie in this series is political activism. I think the politics of the raid are very obvious. Oh, yeah.
Well, this delves a lot into, repressed resentment between class groups and national groups, just like the Billy Jack films are all about, a white guy pretending to be Indian so he can help the Indians.
I joke a little bit. I will say maybe the most political thing you could glean from the Raid 1 and 2 is police corruption, but that's pretty much it.
Don't have ethnocentric gang wars. It's no good.
That is very true.
I want all of our listeners out there to look. If you are having race-based gang wars, any listeners of ours, stop it.
Race war is not cool. No matter what.
Yeah, not cool.
No matter what Trevor Moore and that Whitest Kids You Know sketch, the race war is not going to be fun.
Yeah. Trevor Moore said that, and look what happened to him.
Oh, no!
Look where that caught him.
No! Oh man, we got to cut it before we get canceled for real. No, but
who's going to cancel us? Trevor Moore? He's fucking dead.
Oh,
I was very sad about Trevor. I spent the last 2 weeks after he died a couple of years ago, just listening to his old work. Trevor Moore.
As we said in the last episode, rest in peace, Trevor Moore.
Yeah, for real. A proto dirtbag leftist. I'm going to go out there and say that.
Hell yeah. And with that somber note out of the way, Brian, do we have any final thoughts before we end the episode? Because we're old-ass millennials and it's near our bedtime.
Yeah, it is bedtime. Follow me on Twitter. I'm John Stabs. That's JONSTABB. Twitter sucks now. I guess I should probably abandon it and go to whatever the new thing is, Mastodon or Blue Sky, but I'm just too lazy. And to be honest, if I leave Twitter, I might just be done with social media because I've been on it for so long. But yeah, follow me on there for now. Let's see what happens. Everyone says every 3 years, they're like, I'm leaving Twitter. It's done for. And then they post somewhere else for 3 days and then come back. So I think that's going to happen again, personally.
To be fair, if anyone will kill Twitter, it is Musk. If anybody can kill Twitter, it will be him.
I think there's too many weirdos who are addicted to it, and they are like, I'm going to go somewhere else, and then they end up coming back.
No, totally fair. But yes, you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on Twitter.com. This is going to be Taylor signing off here.
And this is Brian.
Have a good night, everybody. Fight the good fight.